Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo. And today, we're doing another game discussion. Now, this was ridiculously hard to title, but essentially we're going to be talking about developers sharing gameplay mechanics. It's something that does not happen often enough, and this whole discussion was spurred on by a recent interview that Cliff Bleszinski did with Destructoid, where he actually talked directly about how he was shocked that the active reload mechanic hadn't been implemented into more shooter experiences. And I 100% agree. I've been saying this since the launch of Gears of War 2. Why is this not being used anywhere else? It is an instant gameplay enhancer, especially when you throw it into a multiplayer component. When you look at Gears of War's multiplayer, the active reload mechanic is a huge part of its gameplay experience. It provides this, seemingly small risk-reward element, but it's actually really large. Anyone knows jamming their long shot or their Gnasher can completely change the course of a game. And when you're playing a game mode like Execution or Warzone, which is about one life and one set of teammates, that active reload, that missed active reload, that jammed reload can truly turn the course of the game's outcome. It can really be a win or lose factor. And for me, that was always one of my favorite components about Gears of War. When they first announced that mechanic, when Gears of War 1 was revealed, I was like, oh my god, everyone should use this. This is going to be amazing. And then guess what? No one has used it. In fact, there's only one game that I can think of that has an active reload mechanic, and that is Mercenary Kings. Mercenary Kings is a side-scrolling 2D sort of retro shooter similar to Contra, which doesn't really see the same sort of benefits and, sort of risk and reward for that mechanic that you would see in a more multiplayer-focused experience. It's there, and I thought it was really cool to see it inside of another game, but once again, it just reminded me that so few games actually use that mechanic. Now, of course, there are other mechanics outside of the active reload that have been shared and some that haven't. I think one of the biggest ones that I wanted to talk about was Mass Effect's dialogue system. BioWare released Mass Effect and said, hey, no more really long boring text boxes. You don't have to read through all those dialogue choices that you're probably not even going to choose. Let's give the player a selection of choices, all of which are going to alter the way that they continue their current conversation. It was an ingenious idea, and of course BioWare has taken that throughout all of their games, Dragon Age, future Mass Effect releases, so on and so forth, and it's something that, again, very few people have recognized as a great mechanic. In fact, when you try and think of a game outside of a BioWare game that is implementing it, it's actually really hard to do so. However, Fallout 4 recently revealed and announced, and we saw that they are actually going to be using a similar mechanic. No longer do we have to scroll through all those pointless blocks of text. When you go to see Mora chilling out in Crater Town there, or in Megaton, and, you're just like, Mora, I just want to finish this quest for you because I absolutely loathe you. I hate your guts. And you got to scroll through all of that. No more of that. I mean, basically, from the get-go, you could just tell Mora, hey, I really don't like you, let's just get on with this. That would be more of the Fallout 4 approach. And of course, they've went ahead and recorded like 100,000 lines of dialogue to voice act the entire thing, similar to what BioWare would do. Love that Fallout 4 is taking that mechanic into hand. The Fallout 3 system, the New Vegas system, it's old, it's tired. I don't really want to see that in games anymore. I think there's very few experiences that can benefit from that old school sort of dialogue choice. I would say that Pillars of Eternity was a game that, implemented it, and I understand it because it was going for that more retro, really deep RPG approach, but still, perhaps that game could have benefited from a more BioWare similar system. Now, who knows if Bethesda actually looked back at Mass Effect and said, we should have done that with Fallout 3. It's too bad the game released just a year after the release of Mass Effect. I really don't know if that's the case, but either way, they're using a mechanic that was, for the most part, invented by the team at BioWare with the launch of the original Mass Effect. And I think that's a-okay. It's not something that happens enough. Game developers are not looking at what other developers are developing, the mechanics that they're creating that are truly gameplay enhancers. Now, I understand you can't just say throw everything into every game. There are definitely boundaries and lines that have to be tested as to whether or not a certain mechanic will benefit that specific game. For example, the Last Stand mechanic. This was something that Cliff Bleszinski also mentioned in his Destructoid interview, and I remember hearing Randy Pitchford actually say that he thought that mechanic was going to be a really big deal, the Last Stand mechanic in Borderlands. The idea that you go down and then you can kill another enemy while you're sort of bleeding out to revive yourself, sort of an adrenaline thing. Very few games have actually utilized that, but at the same time I can understand why, there are a lot of experiences that I don't think would actually have benefited from that. There are games that have very, strict and rigorous mechanics and putting something like that in there could really throw a wrench into its design. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a place for it, or that there couldn't be a place where it could be beneficial, and that goes with just about any mechanic that anyone creates. Now, I'm not saying that everybody should just go out and instantly copy all of the gameplay elements that another developer makes. I think we've seen what's happened with that. We have that whole, like, slew of games that are very similar in their core ideas, so that being Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and even Shadow of Mordor. I think there were, you know, great ideas for an open world environment that Assassin's Creed went ahead and designed when they created their first open world, but I think it's been taken a little bit too far with how many games just go ahead and snatch and basically steal those components. That being said, a lot of them do make sense, so you can understand why a game like Shadow of Mordor had those, and even why Kojima recognized the benefit of some of those open world mechanics and implemented them into Metal Gear Solid 5. This is something that I feel more developers are starting to recognize, especially with a lot of AAA developers dropping out of the big AAA industry, starting their own indie studios, much like Blazinski and Ariane Bruget, I can never pronounce his name right, sorry Ariane, from Guerrilla have done with Boss Key. You know, they've been part of the AAA industry. They're not afraid to say, that's a really great idea. We're going to put that in our game and we're going to use it in our own way. Now, there's one other example that I wanted to talk about because this is something that I still feel people have completely ignored the advances in, and that is melee in first-person shooters. Not just in like a single-player first-person shooter, but more specifically in a multiplayer experience. Bungie decided when Halo Reach was being developed that they were going to throw a wrench into their classic melee system. Halo's melee has always just been, you know, the rifle butt animation. I'm okay with that because it's a huge part of the first-person combat in Halo. The idea that you're in a multiplayer fight, you throw grenades, you use bullets to do damage, and then you often finish off an opponent with a rifle butt. You know, BXR, anybody? The battle rifle in Halo 2? Everybody remembers BXR back in the day. It's a great, you know, sort of player-created mechanic, something that maybe Bungie didn't really think players would ever utilize as much as they have when they first created Halo, and now it's become sort of a core component of the Halo multiplayer experience. However, let's get back to the point. In Reach, they implemented the sort of first ever assassination mechanic. The idea being that when you're behind another player, whether they be in the air, which always makes this awesome, or on the ground, you can go ahead and initiate in melee, and while holding that button down, you will do an assassination animation. And there was a variety of them added throughout the course of, you know, Reach, and then Halo 4, and now in Halo 5, we're seeing all these different animations. You can tackle players from different angles to get these kills in Halo 5. They've taken it to the next level and recognized this is a really awesome mechanic, and it also embodies what a Spartan is, this sort of power and speed and agility and precision. So that mechanic definitely came full circle for them, and I'd love to see it implemented in more games. That being said, Battlefield 3, of course, the sort of rebirth of the classic Battlefield 2 franchise, decided they were going to implement their very own sort of assassination mechanic with the ability to steal dog tags. So, again, a game that benefited from that while still, you know, while still holding in place the ability to just kind of slash people with knives. Now, one developer and one franchise, I shouldn't say developer, one franchise that has just been all over the place has been Call of Duty. Call of Duty, going back to the original Modern Warfare, implemented the ability just to pretty much whack people with a knife, essentially. You know, they decided, okay, you know, knifing's just going to be this thing, and then they, you know, gave players the ability to quick knife, you know, just pull a knife out when your gun is up and knife somebody, and it turned into a mechanic that was really highly utilized in the game, but I personally believe is not an enhancement at all, it's a frustration. So it's nice to see, leaping all the way forward now to the time that I've spent with the Call of Duty Black Ops 3 beta, they've kind of altered that. They now recognize that a knife is something that has to be equipped, and otherwise players will also rifle butt. And in the front, it takes 2 rifle butts, from behind, it takes 1 rifle butt. So, sort of recognizing the importance of the amount of damage that a melee does, but that is still a system that is very much all over the place across all sorts of first-person shooters. I think the assassination type system that Halo implemented is a very, very solid one. It's one that I appreciate, and it's one that I feel is a direct gameplay enhancer. Not only does it reward the player for their ability to sneak up and flank another opponent, but you also, you know, with the instant kill, you also get that animation that is always really freaking cool. So that's mine. There's probably a million other mechanics out there. I mean, when you start talking RPGs, the list gets even longer and the discussion gets even harder. Basically, all I'm asking is that developers become more aware of when someone has really created a great mechanic and consider what it could do to benefit and enhance their gameplay. I find it very hard that the slew of first-person shooters that have released and failed and done well over the course of the last, 10 years, however long it's been since the original Gears of War now, something like that, haven't recognized that the active reload could possibly have been a mechanic that could enhance their game quite a bit. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. I don't believe that they have, because I feel that we would have seen more than just a side-scrolling 2D arcade shooter implement that mechanic. And if I had to throw one last thing into this whole situation, it's the way that Gears of War handles the third-person shooter. I don't think any game has done third-person shooting as well as Gears of War has. Ghost Recon tried to do it with Future Soldier, and I feel that they failed miserably. That was not an enjoyable game to play because of the way that the camera rotated. So learn from your friends, man. It's that kind of situation, if my brother comes up with a really great idea for mental note-taking or for, any way to improve my motor skills, I'm not just going to ignore that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try and test it out for myself and see if it can benefit me as an individual. The same should be done with the development of video games, and I think many devs out there will completely agree with me on this one. If you guys have any questions for me on the discussion, any thoughts you'd like to share, throw them down in the comments section below. What I would really like to hear is your gameplay mechanic from a specific game that either has been used in another release or hasn't. Let me know, share your story with that. Let me know if it's something that you'd like to see implemented in another game, or if it has been, down in the comments section below. And if you're in Gears of War, you better watch out, because if you jam that active reload, it might just roll up in your face, hit you with the Gnasher. Negativity when taking a critical approach of a product just has to stop. It's no better than the autopilot, overhyped, positive approach that many people have taken in the past. There is a middle ground. You can find it. And trust me, it's not on the negative side. Hell, it's not even on the neutral. In my opinion, it is to be positive when approaching a product. You need to go in, your head held high. I'm not saying blind and high, I'm saying your head held high. It's still 100% possible, and I do this every single day on the channel with every single video I make that has a critical approach, to go into a product with a level of